Welcome to my class students. Today we are discussing the development of transport and communication during the Victorian age or Victorian era. The Victorian era witnessed great development in the fields of transport and communication. We can undoubtedly say that the Victorian age, ranging from 1837 to 1901, witnessed also great development, tremendous development in the areas of transport and communication. With the introduction of steamships, with the coming of steamships, railways, penny post, telegraph, and cables, the entire society underwent a dramatic change. With all these inventions, with all these introductions, with the introductions of steamships, steamships means ships moved with the help of steam, and railways, penny post means post or letters which was affixed with a penny stamp worth a penny post. Then telegraph, that we know, and cables, telegraph cables and telephone cables. The entire society of England underwent or had a dramatic change or a drastic change or a very tremendous change. The slow pace of stagecoach, pace means movement, the slow movement of stagecoach means a horse-drawn carriage, horse-drawn coach. The slow pace, slow movement of stagecoach disappeared and the speed arrived. An era of speed came, an era of an age of speed arrived. The first efficient steam engine was made by James Watt in the year 1769. The first efficient steam engine was invented by or made by James Watt in the year 1769. These engines were used at first to pump water out of mines or to operate a power loom in factories. At first, the use of this steam engine made by James Watt was to pump water out of mines, to take water out of mines or to operate or to work power loom in the factories. It was only later that these engines were used in vehicles. It was much later that the steam engine began to be used in vehicles. Steamboats were used for short journeys. Then later steamboats, boats running with the help of roads moving with the help of steam, were used for short sea journeys, very brief short sea journeys. In the year 1819, a ship fitted with the steam engine crossed the Atlantic Ocean for the first time in the world. A ship fitted with the steam engine crossed the Atlantic Ocean in the year 1819. In the year 1819, a ship fitted with the steam engine crossed the Atlantic Ocean for the first time. The ship was named Savannah. The name of the ship was Savannah. Then a ship called Great Western, a ship's name, it is the name of a ship. A ship called Great Western, designed by Brunel. It was constructed by an Englishman named Brunel, made regular voyages, regular journeys across the Atlantic. Later, a ship named or called Great Western, designed by Brunel, made regular voyages across the Atlantic. Next came huge liners. Liners means large passenger ships like our Titanic. Next came huge liners which carried both passengers and mail. Mail means post or letters from England to all parts of the world. Then it was the period of huge liners. The development was to huge liners which carried both passengers as well as mail from England to the various parts of the world. Now let us look at the development of railways. The story of railways is even more exciting. The story of the development of railways in England is even more exciting, thrilling. It brought about a complete revolution in the way of life and a landscape of the country. You know, the railways, the tremendous development in railways brought about, it made a complete revolution, a total change in the way of life, of the Englishmen as well as the landscape, natural beauty of the country. It also affected the natural beauty of the country, adversity, we can say adversity. Richard Trevithick, Richard Trevithick was a pioneer of locomotives. Locomotives means railway engines, train engines. Richard Trevithick was a pioneer. Pioneer means a forerunner of locomotives. He was the man who first made locomotives or train engines. Then George Stephenson, British civil engineer, and he is also known as father of railways. George Stephenson. He is known as father of railways. Produced an engine which was used chiefly to carry coal. So George Stephenson, British civil engineer, who is also known as the father of railways, produced an engine which was used chiefly to carry coal, C-O-A-L, coal, and coal from mines. From this, he got the idea of attaching carriages to the engines. So he found that the engine was moving, and from this idea he got attaching carriages, bogies to the engines, carriages connecting to the engines. The idea was put into action, and the first 2 railway lines were built. And George Stephenson put the idea into action. He got his idea materialized, and the first 2 railway lines were built. One, Stockton and Darlington. Railway lines was between Stockton and Darlington in northern East England. The city is situated in the northern East England. And another between Liverpool and Manchester. Another between it was an intercity railway line between Liverpool and Manchester, 2 famous cities in England. These were the 2 railway lines introduced by George Stephenson. One was from Stockton to Darlington, and another was from Liverpool to Manchester. With this, England ended the railway era, and we can say, undoubtedly, that with this railway lines, England ended the era of railways. England ended the railway era. To England goes the proud privilege of introducing railways to the world. Actually, the proud privilege of introducing railways in the world goes to England only. To England goes the proud privilege. Privilege means special consideration of introducing railways to the world. Speed of the first train was only 30 miles per hour. The speed of the first train was very small, very minimum. It was 30 miles per hour. In the beginning, railway carriages were not comfortable. It was made of wood and all. In the beginning, railway carriages or coaches were not comfortable, but gradually improvements were made. The 1840s, that decade, 1840s was the decade when railways became very popular. It was during the decade 1830s, railways became very popular in England. The effect of the railway in the society was tremendous. Or we can say the effect of the railways in the society were tremendous, very thrilling and exciting. Distribution of goods was made easy because of the introduction of railway lines and a train. The distribution of goods to various parts of the country became very easy. Highly perishable items like milk and fish could be transported to every corner of the kingdom. An important achievement, we can say, highly perishable things like milk and fish could be carried to every corner of the kingdom, every nook and corner of the kingdom. Postal communication also received a boost. Postal communication also had a boost or a tremendous increase due to this railway system, railways. Postal communication means communication through letters. Also received a boost because of the introduction of railways in England. Traveling became a passion with the people. People were very much fond of traveling because of the introduction of railways. The idea of going to the countryside, village area, for a holiday became very popular with all classes of the society. The very idea of going to the countryside, village area for enjoying a holiday became popular with all classes in the society. There were a few disadvantages also. When we discuss the luxuries, we can also see some disadvantages. So luxuries can be enjoyed only through sacrifices. In the process of laying railway tracks, in the process of laying or constructing railway tracks and building bridges and tunnels, a lot of irreparable damage was done to the beautiful English countryside. So this was a disadvantage of the introduction of railways. In the process of laying railway tracks and building bridges and tunnels, a lot of irreparable damage was done to the beautiful English countryside. We know that railway lines often run in a crisscross manner along the countryside, and all the beauty of the countryside will be damaged. And this was a sacrifice by the English people for enjoying the great luxury of railway lines. Many innovations were made in the area of communications in the 19th century. During the Victorian age or in the 19th century, many innovations means novelties, new innovations were made in the area of communications in the 19th century. Many innovations were made in the area of communications in the 19th century. Post had been a government monopoly. At that time, post or letters or sending letters, post, P-O-S-T-S, post, sending letters had been a government monopoly in England. Since the reign of James the First, not James the First, James the First. Since the reign of James the First, there was tax on letters. The government introduced tax on letters, tax on sending letters, but it was very difficult to impose. It is strictly because private travelers smuggled letters. But the tax was very difficult to be imposed because private travelers smuggled letters. You know, smuggling, taking something from one country to another, or bringing something to one country illegally is called smuggling. See, now we are having a lot of smuggling, gold smuggling scam. We are enjoying the gold smuggling scam nowadays. And you know smuggling. So, during the reign of James the First, there was tax on letters, but it was very difficult to impose. It's because private travelers smuggled letters. They carried letters with them and they gave letters to the people concerned. So the tax was very difficult to be collected from the people who are sending letters. Then during the reign of Queen Victoria or 19th century, Rowland Hill, an English teacher, inventor and social reformer, Rowland Hill, campaigned, he made struggles, campaigned for the much needed postal reforms. He was the first man who demanded postal reforms. But is his name Rowland Hill, English teacher, inventor and social reformer, campaigned for the much needed postal reforms, which led to the establishment for uniform penny post for all letters within the kingdom. And finally, the result of the campaign was the government was compelled to introduce or establish uniform penny post. Letters carrying stamp worth a penny. Uniform penny post. You know, the expense for sending a letter to any area of the country was a penny, the smallest unit of British pound, penny. See, who campaigned for the much needed post reforms? What was his name? Rowland Hill, the English teacher, reformer, who led to the his campaign led to the establishment for uniform penny post for all letters within the kingdom. In the year 1840, the penny black stamp, the first adhesive postal stamp, pastable stamp. Adhesive means pastable postal stamp with the Queen Victoria's image, having the profile of Queen Victoria, having the picture of Queen Victoria. The stamp had the profile or image or picture of Queen Victoria. It was an adhesive stamp. It could be pasted on the cover of the letter or on covers. So in 1840, the penny black stamp, the first adhesive postal stamp within Queen Victoria's image was issued. Queen Victoria's profile was issued. Britain was the first country to use stamps. See, when we examine the history of the postal reform, we can see that Britain was the first country to use stamp for letters, and soon other countries copied the example or imitated the example introduced by Great Britain. The transport of mail had undergone dramatic changes. Let us see the improvement in the field of transport. The transport of mail means letters, has undergone dramatic changes since 1600. Yeah, till 1750, mail used to be transported through pack horses. Pack horses means the horses which carried things. Pack horses. Horses which carried something. The horses or donkeys which are used to carry something. And such horses were called pack horses. The horses which carried luggage, pack horses. So till 1750, the mail used to be transported or carried by pack horses or through pack horses. Pack horses. Pack horses. What do you mean by pack horses? Pack horses are the horses used to carry luggages. Here mail was carried or transported with the help of pack horses. So pack horses were used to carry the luggage or the letters till 1750. Later from 1750 to 1840, mail coaches were used. And later during the period from 1750 to 1840, mail coaches. Coaches means the carriages drawn by horses. Carriages drawn by vehicles drawn by horses. Mail coaches were used, and since 1850, from the year 1850, since 1850, the railways placed a major role in this field. The railways began to play a vital role in the field of carrying mail. Air mail service was introduced in 1919. Air mail service. Air mail service to other countries was introduced in 1919. Then another major breakthrough. What do you mean by breakthrough? What does it mean? Important development, breakthrough. Another major breakthrough in the field of communication was the introduction of electric telegraph. Another important or vital breakthrough or a major incident in the field of communication was the introduction or the coming or the advent of electric telegraph. The telegraph was the product of several inventors. Telegraph was actually the product of several inventors. Means there were to introduce the telegraph. Telegraph was actually the product of so many inventors. Sir Charles Wheatstone made the earliest workable telegraph in England. The earliest workable telegraph in England was made by Sir Charles. He was awarded knighthood, that is why he is known as Sir Charles Wheatwood. Sir Charles Wheatstone, Sir Charles Wheatstone made the earliest workable telegraph in England. Soon, telegraph wires were seen crisscrossing the country along with the railways. Along the railways, we could see the telegraph lines crisscrossing the country. Soon, telegraph wires were seen crisscrossing the country along with the railways. Reuters, you might have heard it, Reuters, a famous news agency still in existence. Reuters, R-E-U-T-E-R-S, Reuters news agency was begun in London. Reuters news agency was begun in London, and the telegraph helped in conveying the news very rapidly. The telegraph played an important role in conveying the news very rapidly, and Reuters enjoyed much benefit from the telegraph system. The year 1868 became an important one in the history of telegraphs. You see, the year 1608 became an important one in the history of telegraph because the first Atlantic cable was laid from Ireland to Newfoundland. During this year saw the laying of the first cable from Ireland in British Empire to Newfoundland, a province in Canada, Canadian province, Newfoundland. That is how it became, the year 1868 became an important year in the history of the telegraph. Because the first Atlantic cable through Atlantic Ocean was laid from Ireland to Newfoundland, Newfoundland province in Canada. Eventually, cables were laid connecting all countries of the world. Finally, what happened? Ultimately, the cables were laid connecting almost all parts of the world. And a greater speed was brought to in the field of communication. Greater speed was achieved in communications. There was a revolution in the press as well. In the press or in the newspaper field also, there was a great revolution or tremendous change. The newspapers of the mid-Victorians had been very serious and dignified. The newspapers during the middle of the Victorian age. Newspapers of the mid-Victorians had been very serious and dignified, prestigious, in bombastic style, in erudite style, in scholarly style. The presentation of the news was very dull and boring. Because of the scholarly style, the presentation of the news was very dull and boring. They appealed only to the intellectual readers. Such a news, such a intellectual news, such a scholarly or erudite news appealed or attracted only the intellectual readers who belong to the intellectual class were attracted by the erudite or scholarly news published in the newspapers during the middle of the Victorian period. Then towards the end of the century, end of the 19th century or Victorian era, cheap and sensational news replaced the stuffy papers. Cheap and sensational news replaced the stuffy news of the earlier age. Stuffy means scholarly news, erudite news of the earlier age was replaced by very cheap and sensational. We are all interested in sensational news, which is very interesting to us. The news was presented in the form of a story. During the end of the 19th century or Victorian age, the news was presented in the form of a story. Sentences and paragraphs were deliberately kept short. In the newspapers, they made stringent measures to reduce the size of the sentences and the paragraphs. Sentences and paragraphs were deliberately kept short. The primary aim of such newspapers was not to inform. The basic aim of such newspapers was not to inform people but to amuse, to entertain people. This was the primary aim of the newspapers during the last stage of the 19th century. This change was brought about by, so this type of news, this change was actually brought about by, introduced by Lord Northcliffe and his brother Harold Cliff. Two brothers, Lord Northcliffe and his brother Harold Cliff, were responsible for this change. In the year 1896, Lord Northcliffe founded the Daily Mail, which is still in currency. In 1896, Lord Northcliffe founded the Daily Mail, which became extremely popular because it contained, they gave importance to sensational news, and the reading of newspaper became highly entertaining to the people. So who was the founder of the Daily Mail? Lord Northcliffe founded the Daily Mail, which became extremely popular with the masses. The telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. We know. Telephone, another item in the field of communication. The telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, a Scottish-born inventor, scientist and engineer. Alexander Graham Bell was born in Scotland, a Scottish-born inventor. He was also a scientist and engineer. His period was from 1847 to 1922. 1847 to 1922. The first telephone exchange was opened in London, because of the strenuous work of Alexander Graham Bell. The first telephone exchange was opened in London in 1879. The very first telephone exchange was opened in London in 1879 with just 7 or 8 subscribers. The subscribers were minimum, they were only 8 or 7 subscribers. With the limited amount of subscribers, the telephone exchange was firstly opened in London. Today we know A lot of revolutions came in the field of telephone. We are all addicted to telephone or mobile phones. Today, telephone has become so common that people have almost forgotten the art of writing letters. Earlier times, till 1990s, people used letters to convey messages. Letters were actually keys to open the hearts of people. They were permanent records. And now, see, nobody is fond of writing letters. Nobody is in the habit of writing letters. Everyone has forgotten to write letters. So today telephone has become so common that people have almost forgotten the art of writing letters. So this is the tremendous development in transport and in the areas of transport and communication during the Victorian age. Study well. Goodbye.